All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. I'm really excited to dive into this incredible office hours. And this is all perfect because based on what everyone is focusing on or working on right now, it sounds like this will be the perfect session for a Q&A. So that's how this session will unfold. It'll be heavily Q&A driven. So if you have any specific questions that you've always wanted to get answered by an expert, this is your chance to do so. So don't be shy. Feel free to unmute yourself or drop in the chat any questions. But first off, a bit of background information on our esteemed expert. Liz is the founder and creator of Learn to Make a Product, an online incubator for entrepreneurs with physical products. She has connected, mentored, and provided resources for hundreds of people to help them turn their product ideas into successful businesses. In addition to offering consulting and digital products on her own platform, Liz partners with a startup called Makers Row to provide guidance to their high-level users. She also writes a column for Forbes about the process of developing, sourcing, and producing a product. Liz, we're so excited to learn from you today. We know how valuable your time is, and we're so grateful for you. And I will let you take it away.
Yeah, so I'll give you guys a quick kind of rundown on how I got where I am. So our platform, like Hannah said, helps people launch their product ideas. So everything from fashion lines to medical devices to pet products, you name it. People come and they're like, I have this idea, I want to get it made. And we really help them by providing advice and connections, go through the process from start to finish and hopefully minimize their, frustration, their time and money loss, all of those things that can really be pitfalls if you're just kind of, trying to do something for the first time in an unknown industry. So we're filling that gap. I, a long time ago, launched one of the first reusable shopping bag companies. And so that's how I kind of got into the product space. And we're not talking, over 15 years ago. That was its own adventure, and the world was a lot different. We did not have a lot of the tools. I feel like I sound like an old lady, but we just didn't have a lot of the tools that people have now. It is 10 times easier, even in that short span of time, to get a product-based business off the ground. But going through that process, I managed to sell quite a lot of units of product, but the kind of mistakes that were made were so painful, both from a financial and kind of emotional place, that I really was like, I am going to figure this industry out. And I just spent years talking to experts, kind of fine tuning our processes to get, where I am today. So I love doing these Q&As, and I'm really glad because I think you all are here for slightly different reasons. So I'd really like to make it question-based, just, whatever you are curious about, let's go down that road, because it sounds like you guys are kind of coming from different places.
I can go ahead and kick us off, and then everyone can feel free to jump in after that. So, Liz, I would love to know manufacturing best practices and pitfalls you'd recommend to watch out for.
So there's a lot, but there are a few really basic things that I recommend everyone do. So let's say you have an idea, you're trying to make something overseas, you're going on to Alibaba, looking in China or anywhere in the US. There's a few things that you should always do. So vetting is probably the most important thing. And you will know this from dealing with any vendors, right? Like vetting, that's how you eliminate a lot of your quality problems up front. And so the thing that people don't always do overseas is they don't realize you can get someone on the ground in a factory you're considering overseas for a couple $100. There exist these like quality control agencies that work to protect and look out for the interests of people just like you. And I think people often think that's like something only a corporation could afford to do, but it is affordable. So you tell them, I'm considering this factory. I've been chatting with them. I would love for you to go visit them and give me a report. And this can, this is not going to solve all your problems, but it's going to be a starting place for understanding if a factory's clean and well run and real, legitimate place. So that's one of the things I always recommend doing. The second, and this is going to sound like the most obvious advice in the world, but make sure you're working with a factory that specializes in your product category. This is probably one of the most common mistakes I see, because people think when they go to a factory and say, yeah, can you make this thing, that if the factory says, yes, we can, they think, okay, great, they can make it. They're a factory. They said they can make it. And what happens is people are eager for business. There's all kinds of reasons, especially overseas, where factories claim they can make something that they may technically be able to make, but maybe not in the way you want it or at the quality level you want. So you just need to make sure, have they done this thing before? And how do I know that they've done this thing before? Can they show me a client? Can they show me photos? And again, this is not a perfect science. If someone really wanted to pull the wool over your eyes, they could, but I don't see that happening that often. I do find that when you dig, you're usually able to get this kind of information. And when you combine this with a kind of holistic vetting strategy, it's an important piece of the process. So have they made your specific category? And if they've made your specific category, have they worked with other companies who want at the same quality level, right? So making a shoe is not always the same as making a shoe, right? Depending on like where you are. So that's really important. And the third thing I always say is before you ship samples, and this is especially if you're working with a factory far away, let's say you've gone through vetting, you're starting to sample with them, you want detailed photos or videos before that sample ships to you. So when you start to ship overseas, it gets expensive. It could be $70, $100 each time you're sending something back and forth. Especially people with smaller budgets, this can add up. So this is a way to catch glaring errors right before things ship to you. So that can help kind of minimize problems during sampling. And then I'll add on one more thing at the end, because there's so many things, but this is not the most exciting topic. So just like I said, you can get someone on the ground in the factory to check it out before you get started. When you actually produce, so let's say that shoe you ordered, you've seen the samples, they're great, you're ready to make 500 of them. You again want someone in the factory, eyes on the product before it ships out to you, before you make that final payment, right? So you've made it usually a 50% payment and then a 50% before product ships. So again, you hire that quality control agency. We're talking $300 for an inspection. They give you a report and you at least know you're not making that final payment on bad product, the cost of shipping. You'll still have a problem on your hands if the product is not good, but you've minimized your exposure, right? You've minimized the problem and you can hopefully remedy it, right? If you do find there's an issue through that report. So those are kind of like the bare minimum things that I would advise everyone should do, especially when producing overseas.
That's awesome. I have a question. Thank you. I have a question around the manufacturing overseas piece. When we were going down this path of vetting our factory, we realized the contract that we had with our client was a lot more in depth than the contract that we were getting with them. Like theirs was like a half a page, and the contract that we had with our client was like 30 pages. So like a lot of the liability was on us. We also recognize that we probably wouldn't be able to enforce anything anyway. And we were talking about China specifically, but I'm just curious, is that in your experience normal? And also because the second part to this question is that we care about like the social and environmental aspect of the factories that we work with. So we had hired someone on the ground to go in and vet them and take a look and took pictures of everything. But he also told us that there's an incredible amount of corruption and that those reports are pretty much lied and like not reliable. So I'm curious if you've gone through any of that certification stuff, like how you address that. Do you go yourself eventually? Like what has been your process?
So let me answer that in a few parts. So with the legal stuff, when companies are working at like very high production volumes, they will get on the ground lawyers there so that you do have an enforceable thing. That's not, I'm working with smaller makers that are just that's not going to be what they spend their money on. So that would be kind of depending on what you're spending overseas, but they know, you're not going to go over there and enforce a contract, especially for like a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 issue. It just wouldn't make sense. So that is kind of, you're in a sticky place. But if you were, if your budget was higher, you would engage someone who specialized in that process overseas. And you would invest it in a kind of Chinese contract. When it comes to the inspection agencies, so we work primarily with a French company who I know is not corrupt, right? But it would depend on who you are working with in that capacity. Is it someone you trust with, that's come personally referred with a great background? When it comes to
which agency, which French group is that?
I'll send it out after the call. I'll get it.
You can't share it right now. Okay.
Yeah, I'll send it. It's called, it's SOFEAST. T.
Okay.
Okay. So they're wonderful. So when it comes to actually inspections, which is a little bit of a different thing, getting those photos, you'd want to work with someone you trust. When it comes to the agents, so the kind of fair trade, those kind of certifications, when we're looking for factories with a specific environmental or social bent, we'll always source through the kind of umbrella agency. So if you were looking for like a certain kind, people want blue sign fabric, right? It's like a certain kind of environmentally friendly fabric. We'll actually go to that agency and ask which factories have been recently certified. So it's like a kind of roundabout way to source. The thing I do see happening is people kind of fudging like certifications, like the factory fudging certifications. So to use the recycled fabric example, they'll say, yeah, this material is recycled. And then when we ask to look at the certification, it's 3 years old or something like that. So you'll want to kind of be aware of that. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess like for us, we were looking at pretty big factories that already had audits done, but like SGS and like these big firms that have horrible stories written about them. Like, we're not going to pay for our own independent auditor to go in and do their own audit. So,
so you wouldn't pay for that?
Sorry?
You wouldn't pay for your own audit?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how much it costs, but
like a couple $100.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you could get more extensive, but if you just want like eyes on the ground for your specific personal questions, everyone has their own.
Oh, no. So like we had that. I think it's more like an actual audit that we could show to our clients, or like if we're looking to get B Corp certified, right? So like what's going to qualify as like a good enough audit for that type of thing?
Yeah, I should put you in touch with the agency we work with, because they do customized projects just like you're talking about.
Got it. Okay.
Like, how do we solve that? And we're not talking atrocious amounts of money to do this kind of thing. So it would be worth a conversation with them.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else have a question?
We had a few.
I have a question.
Perfect.
I work with a lot of founders, and one question that comes up often for people in the idea or just a little bit post idea stage is, when should I work with a product development company? So what do what's been your experience with sending founders to different types of product development companies that can help them develop their product, and the costs associated with that? Like, what do you recommend?
Most people we work with don't work with a product development agency, maybe 5%, 10%, because of the cost.
Yeah.
So most people come in with something that they are able, through kind of a more bootstrapping approach.
Mhm.
Like, I'll give you an example. They'll get some like preliminary drawings done on Fiverr, right? We'll take them, they'll more lean on the factory to help with the development angle. And if we have to go back to the drawing board and work with like a kind of freelance industrial designer on some sort of spec drawings, they will kind of do that. But most of them have their budgets, just they're not going and spending thousands and thousands with a product dev place, which I find tend to be more with like larger corporate client, people who are wanting to develop things. But yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Anyone else have anything?
I can ask a question.
Sure.
So mine is kind of, I guess it's going to be a bit of a general question, but I just want to get an idea of like financials. Because I'm sort of new to this space, I'm entertaining it, but I don't know what to expect or what kind of numbers. Like, let's say if you're a small business, that's the goal, and like, what's the kind of cost that somebody can expect when you're going into this area, and what's the kind of like revenue, like how do you even work to understand that?
No, everyone's different. I think some of the interesting things for me over the years has really been seeing it's not the people with the biggest budgets that always come out. Like it really, really isn't. In fact, they tend to have other issues. A sweet spot that I've seen, if people are skilled in the sense that they're not relying on everyone else to do everything, right? Like they can do their own social media, or they can do something themselves. Maybe they have some graphic design skills. They bring something to the table. They can usually get away with spending probably between $30,000 and $60,000 to get a website up, to get inventory, to get a basic brand identity. And then they can kind of grow from there. It's not that they won't have to spend any more money, but that really gets them in the door. I was just working with a client yesterday who I think they recently launched and they're doing about $30,000, $40,000 a month. So that's great. We like people to get to 10. That's like the first benchmark, and then move up from there. And she's a school teacher. She started with like, I don't know, 40 grand putting into the business. So that's great. But that kind of 30 to 60 range, it means they're just scrappy enough to not waste money. Because that's what I see with the clients who have larger budgets. They just kind of want to throw money at everything, and it's not always the solution.
Thank you, that helps. So benchmark in terms of revenue, you suggest aiming for something around 10,000 of revenue once you actually do.
Once you get to $10,000 a month, we can really go from there. That is the hardest. That 0 to 10,000 is definitely the hardest to achieve. So as long as you're getting, you're not going to get there right away. Most people get there within, if they're going to get there, they get there within about a year. Now, again, if you're coming in, the people who we work with are not coming in typically with these huge startup budgets. They're not like venture capital. They're coming in with their own money. They're DIYing a lot. So that process would likely be accelerated for someone with a much larger budget. But these are people who have jobs, are kind of launching something on the side and then going into it full time. Go ahead.
Hi, Liz. Are a lot of the people you work with, are they coming to you with more of a concept to build a business, like a shampoo company, and they need help figuring out how to fill the bottles and where to do the mixture, and they want to eventually do a whole branding campaign and where to get actually the logistics and shipping, how it gets to the store to the consumer, that sort of thing? Or are you working with people who maybe they have like an invention idea or something like that, and then ultimately they want it sold in the Bed Bath & Beyond or Home Depot, but it's not something maybe that they foresee as a huge new beauty brand or something?
Yeah,
like that?
it's all over the place. So some people really want to get out into the world as a known brand. Others are just like, I want to, like kill this Amazon category. I don't even want my own website. So
Right.
People really have differing goals. We even have people who they do so well just on Etsy. It like blows my mind.
Right. Okay.
So they're all over the place.
Okay, excellent. The other thing is I hopped on a little late, so apologies for that. But how does your organization make money? Like, are you taking a percentage of things? How does that all work?
So we're a subscription service. So people sign up and they get either 90 minutes or 5 hours of guidance time each month.
Okay.
So as they're going through the process of launching, they have a lot of questions, they check in, and we're helping them along that way.
Okay. Great. And then say you had something you were working on, you had a prototype, and say there was a piece of metal that it involved, right? Like a custom piece of metal with a curvature or something like that. Can you and your team help advise on where to get that cut and made and get a sample, but then get it in mass volume?
Yeah. Okay. So we have tons of supplier lists. We also have relationships, and part of what we do is really teach people how to source. So like, here are the places to look. Here's what you look for. Here's what you ask them, like walking them through that.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a follow-up to Sonia's question. What's typically the breakdown of the 30 to 60,000? And I know that the companies are going to vary a lot, but if you could just.
Sure. So it depends what people can do on their own. And like I said, it's their goal. So if they want to be a brand, they need to invest quite a bit in the design, the graphic design, the beautiful website. So we normally put about 10,000 towards all of that stuff, right? Like getting just like a sleek, great brand identity. They might put the other 5 to 10 towards inventory. And we'll order a small, like the lowest possible amount of inventory they can order. And that's what they'll start with, so that they can save the remainder of that budget for marketing. So it's a very loose breakdown.
And then do you have a breakdown for marketing? Or does it depend?
That depends on what they're doing. So I recommend people choose like 1 or 2 channels. So like, paid social ads and contacting influencers or whatever. So they will typically choose those, and we'll start really small. So, we will, like, an iterative way. So if they're doing paid social ads, the mistake that I see people make is they go out and some company like promises them the world, and $7,000 later they have nothing. So we'll really start like as tiny and test, and then once you can trust that algorithm and that process, we'll put more money in. So that's being spent hopefully little by little, even though it's not a ton of money, it's enough that we can break it up a bit.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Go on. Go ahead.
You may have gone over this, I think maybe right when I hopped on, but are these vendors and factories that are around the world, or are most of them based in the US, or is it just a variety?
So it's most common for us to work with people in the US and in Asia, but we certainly have people, in Mexico, India, various places. So all around the world. Yeah, Italy, people go everywhere.
Okay.
And you work with like any industry, right? It's not, do you have like any limitations on what industries?
Yeah, some people I will turn away. So we don't do a ton of formulated products. So anything that requires a recipe, like a beauty product, a food product, I will help them. I can still advise. It's not like none of the things we teach apply to those types of things, but they're just not areas, especially food, perishables, don't get involved with. So we kind of set those aside. And then when it goes to really like high tech devices, like if you wanted to come make like, I don't know, a lawnmower or like tractor or something, like those kind of mechanized things, we don't. It's really pretty much anything you could find like in your home, consumer products that you would have in your house, in your office, things like that.
Got it. Yeah, I have a supplement company, and I didn't go abroad I only really like sourced like my manufacturer here actually I'm in LA. So it was like convenient. So I could go there and I could keep an eye on it, and I could meet them in person and know that they were doing everything right, and like, just show up unannounced. No, I'm just kidding. But that was kind of like the beautiful thing of them being close and nearby. But I never really even thought about engaging with anyone outside, just because I wanted to have that hands-on, even if it was a little bit more expensive. But as margins start to change and everything, obviously it's good to have cost comparisons. So it would be interesting to me. I just haven't actually gone that direction yet in order to see what the cost comparison would be overseas, or if they'd still do just as good of a job. So anyways, I guess
it's good just doing the preliminary research to even see if it's worth diving into that process, because you could find a reputable partner. You absolutely could, but it would take quite a bit. So even just like dipping your toe in and getting some preliminary pricing can show you like, okay, this is promising, or it's just not worth it. In your case, especially, like you'd want to look into the cost of shipping and because that can add on a lot. So that would be helpful. Like you almost like mock up a trial order with a factory that you talk to, and you can get pricing information from them. So it's a little bit of research, but it can give you a lot of intel.
Yeah, I think if I decided to ship internationally, it's crazy. I mean, obviously I know that every company is different, but like from a supplement standpoint, selling in the US versus selling in other countries, like we are way more like liberal with everything. And so I'm like, oh, I want to sell there. Oh, that's not going to work. I'm going to have to like get a sponsor, and then I'm going to have to also get like someone else. So there's like a lot of, I don't know. I think for me, if I decide to go internationally, I would have to figure out like someone to be able to handle like how to find a sponsor, and then figuring out where to manufacture, even if I have the formula. But anyways, sorry, I just ranted.
Good luck.
Since we're kind of on the topic of, overseas, international relationships, how do you recommend, or do you have any tips for managing those relationships when they're, different time zones, halfway across the world, just like communicate?
Yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of my life like waking up at 3 a.m. in order to communicate with overseas factories. I think like hiring someone on the ground sooner. I would have done that sooner in my time. So, I mentioned the agency we work with, they will hire out someone there on the ground for like $40 an hour who can almost project manage your stuff. So that can, just when there's a language barrier, that can be a worthwhile investment when you're getting started if you find the right person. The other thing, I always liked to visit. So not everyone wants to fly halfway around the world. Obviously, we're not in a great time for that now, but it can be, there's lots of technical ways that you can handle these relationships, but on a human level, it can be really easy to get kind of like mean or dismissive when you're dealing with tough production stuff over email if you've never met the person. And for some reason, this is even more so when you're dealing with people in other countries. I don't know if it's some sort of I don't know why it happens, but I see perfectly nice clients just not being very nice to the factories they're working with sometimes. And I think when you visit in person and have that human connection, it becomes very, very hard to do that because you have a kind of friendship that has developed. And even that's, even the case in the United States, when you go and have that personal connection, the factory owners absolutely will prioritize you a bit. There's just a kind of kinship that develops. So I think it's a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, definitely a tough time to be.
Yeah.
Trying to fly across the world.
Did you have a question, Andrea?
I did. On your website, it says you guys don't sign NDAs, which I get because there's liability issues if two products come out that are fairly similar. But is there anything in particular that you do that makes your client and your I guess subscribers feel comfortable that there's a privacy element, there's confidentiality element to it?
Yeah. So very rarely we have some people who are just like, I don't want to share details. So I am pretty skilled at this point of being able to talk about your product without talking about the special sauce. Like we find ways to get around it. So one of the things we'll do is come up with almost like a dummy product. Like if a factory could make X, they could also make Y. Okay, so let's talk about why, and that works. Again, we're not going to get 100% of the details, but it works quite well because sourcing practices and a lot of brand building and business building is universal. We don't need to talk about whatever component makes your thing special in order to do that. So we will have that workaround. And otherwise it's just like, if people, if that's important, then they have to go somewhere else. Yeah.
Okay.
One question that was submitted that I thought was really interesting, and I have no idea what will come of it, but someone was wondering how to be wary of scams. So I was wondering if there's anything that we should be aware of when it comes to creating physical products.
Yeah, so this is more common when working overseas, although it does happen once in a while in the US. So like simple things. When you are communicating with a supplier, I like for you to look at their email address. If they don't have a company email address and that it ties to a website, and if they don't, you'll want to either ask about that or just, when people are really concerned, we'll find out the company name and contact someone else at the facility and say, I just want to make sure so-and-so is working with you, because some of the scams you will see are someone kind of imitating or impersonating a factory. So that's number one. Also doing that on the ground inspection, that kind of preliminary factory inspection that I mentioned when we first started talking, that's a really great way to see, is this like a real company? And I think it's a worthwhile use of your money. So that's number two. When it comes to wiring money, you'll also want to make sure that the money they're asking you to wire is the same email address that you've been communicating, like it's the same company email address you've been communicating with. Because sometimes if you see a brand new email, that can be a red flag. So those are just a few of the basic things. When people are dealing with a site like Alibaba, which is where a lot of people find overseas suppliers, you're not going to eliminate all your problems by doing this, but if there's little filters you can use, like, have they been inspected? How long have they been in business? Those things. So those are like preliminary things you can do to minimize issues. The most common thing that happens overseas is that you're working with a trading company or an intermediary and you don't know it. So you think you're working directly with a factory, but you're actually working with a liaison. They might be an approved liaison of the factory, but you just, you want to be working directly with a facility. And so, so asking the person you're dealing with directly, are you a trading company? Are you an agent? Can be a good start. Some of them will tell you. And then making sure you are having direct access to the factory. So that's again where that in-person visit comes, because that way you have the factory address, you know who they are. So even if there is someone else, helping with the communication, you still have direct access to that facility, which you need down the road to do your quality control inspections.
This is probably, we could probably talk about it for a long time, but if someone was wanting to start an e-commerce company, what would be a few of the first steps they should take to hopefully set themselves up for success?
So a lot of people don't do this. So when you're working on like a Shopify or a WooCommerce, they have themes and templates. So are you talking about actually selling online? That's how I'm interpreting that through e-commerce. Right. Yeah. So you almost always need some sort of customization on those websites. It's not just as simple as you downloading that theme, making a few edits yourself, unless you have design capabilities. There's always some people who can do that. But I would recommend investing in getting someone to help you. So we'll have people create what's called a style tile. So they'll work with a web design firm. They'll get all like the fonts and colors, button colors and section styles for that website done first. And then you kind of customize and apply that to your theme. So it's a bit of technical detail, but it really, you're not going to get the kind of website. Some people do as well. Like, they never say never, but you're not going to get that branded, beautiful looking website by just using an out-of-the-box theme. It's going to look like an out-of-the-box theme. So that's kind of number one. So after that, when I really think, in addition to having a good brand, right? The things that sell online are great photos and great messaging, clear messaging. So you've got to invest in photos, but most everyone knows that. What they tend to skip over is the messaging piece. So we have everyone read this book. It's called Building a Story Brand. It's very good. It talks about messaging strategy and taking that in and either doing your best with kind of their framework or investing and working with a copywriter can really work wonders. So the copywriter we work with most often is not cheap. People get a little sticker shock. She's maybe, I don't know, $35,000 or $4,000 just for homepage copy and messaging strategy. But the difference that makes in people's ad campaigns and just the stickiness of that overall website is pretty astonishing. So again, it's, if you don't have it, you have to do the best to get around it. But if you do have the money and you're kind of deciding where to spend it, that would be one of the places that I would put it.
And is that, how much does the Shopify site typically, like of the basic stuff you were talking about, how much does that typically run?
Just to buy a Shopify theme, it's like a couple $100, and then it's, a low monthly fee.
Sorry, I meant for the consults, for the, like, to hire someone to make it better. Yeah.
So the company we work with that does the style tiles, they charge $1,500 for the homepage design. And if you have them custom coded in, it's $2,400. And you're getting a completely customized, beautiful website, homepage from that. So they're not dealing with the other pages for that cost. That would be more. But most of the people we're working with are like, I want to spend the least amount of money for the biggest impact. So by doing those global edits of your fonts, the button colors that apply to the other pages, right? And then by doing the homepage, we can get something pretty great. Sometimes people will pay to customize like an about page or a how it works page if they have a functional product, but we can get like a good baseline with just that.
And are you able to share those contacts, or do you have to be a client to have access to
we only
those two?
If you want to email me afterward and you would like an introduction, I'm happy to do that for Dreamers.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Liz, I have to hop off, and thank you to Hannah for organizing this, but I definitely have something that I want to launch and I've been working on for a little while. And so I guess I can just reach out to you on your website, or maybe Hannah will share your email later.
Yeah,
But I
yeah. We'll send out an email to everyone afterwards. So definitely.
Okay. Thanks, guys. I really, really appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you for joining. So you were touching a bit on, being cost effective, budgeting, things like that. Do you have any other tips for how to keep costs low when launching a physical product?
Yeah, so it's just spending your money in the right places. Kind of like with the supplier vetting, I'm just amazed at how many people don't vet any of the partners they work with. So let's use copywriter for an example. They'll go out and pay someone, and then what they get back is subpar. This is like before I'm working with them. What they get back is subpar, and it's like, well, has this person worked in fashion before? Have they done, and it's not always, the answer is not always yes. So vetting each of those partners just to make sure they're experienced in your category and they've gotten results for other people. A big thing with like the PR and the marketing stuff is they're not actually getting performance kind of metrics before they spend, they part with their somewhat limited budget. And so that can really be kind of like a death. That can just be bad. If you only have $10,000 to spend on marketing, you go and waste half of it on someone who just doesn't deliver. That's a really big problem. So being careful. I would even go as far to say, don't work with someone until you've gotten like another expert's like eyes on them. Is this a good photographer to work with? Is this, because people just, if they're new to the industry, they just don't seem to be able to make those decisions as clearly as you'd hope.
I have a question. Just when you're starting out, would love to learn any, mistakes to avoid, maybe on the legal side. Should we be using NDAs? Is that totally taboo? Like, what is normal? What is abnormal? I don't know, sort of how to tread that line before working, with someone that I've never met before. So.
Yeah, so when it comes with factories in the US, you'll probably get half that will sign an NDA and half that won't. Some for the same reason. They just hear a ton of ideas. They don't want to kind of get legally entangled. So it really depends on how important it is to you. If it's crazy important, you'll just be prepared that you might have to do a little extra sourcing since your pool is more limited and you'll have to kind of dig deeper. If it's not as important, we will just err on the side of caution. So we won't share your, product details with everyone just willy-nilly. We will be very cautious and kind of pre-vet those suppliers, and then just choose one or two to, extend that information to. And you still will withhold. Like if you were making a garment, right? We would send them like a really basic almost photo or a basic sketch. We're not telling them exactly how it's made, the exact design. We're not sending them a full tech pack right away. You can get a lot of preliminary information without sharing everything. So knowing kind of what to share and what to send is something I'll guide people through, just to give the factory like just enough information and not cross that line of they could go and just replicate this easily.
Great. And then I guess for yourself, like what entities do you recommend your clients set up? Are they a C Corp, LLC? Like what's the best way to protect your personal, I guess, liability, or just from more on the legal side?
People will just be an LLC. And I'll normally put them in touch if they don't have a business lawyer that they're working with. There's so many great people in Dreamers and Doers as well. We also have some lower cost legal resources. Where they'll kind of churn out those things for you. If you're like, that's not, everyone has differing levels of what's important to them. Some people are like, I just want the paperwork in place and I want to get going. And if this turns into something, then I'll deal with it. Other people are want to invest much more upfront.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm finding this to be really helpful, so thank you. A quick question is something we were chatting about earlier. So the journey to the first 10,000 is sort of like the benchmark for success, as I understand it. Could you speak to like, what have you seen in people's experiences? Like what's been people's successes in getting there? Where have people kind of fallen short and had mistakes? What were some of the learnings?
Yeah, so the people who succeed have one of two things. they either have some sort of marketing channel that they are comfortable pushing out themselves. So let's say they're like just crazy great at social media and they just get traction and they get followers and they're really great at that. Or they have figured out how to, like, some people just figure out how to nail SEO. They take classes or they just can like figure it out themselves. They start to get great search ranking. They have something that they can do where they're not reliant on others, because the second you're reliant on others for everything, it gets really expensive and you can blow through your money really quickly. So they have at least one channel that they can do that with. The exception, and this would be, I said in the beginning that people with the biggest budgets don't always succeed. However, some people come in with so much money that they can spend on marketing that they have the luxury of kind of trying and failing with marketing. And they do ultimately hit a groove, especially if they have some guidance and they're not just like blowing their money. So one of those two things. If you were totally helpless when it came to marketing your product and you didn't have any money, those are the people that it's nearly impossible to get them to that first benchmark, because they just can't, they may have a perfectly great product, but they just can't kind of get out there and tell people about it.
I guess what I'm hearing is to have some level of comfort with the marketing aspect is going to be to your benefit.
Yes, or a lot of money.
Okay.
Or you get lucky. There's exceptions to every rule. But yeah, or it's something you can teach yourself. It does not have to be a skill you already come in knowing.
Right.
We certainly have people who are like, I am committed to figuring out Facebook ads and I'm going to sit down day and night until I can do that on my own. And there's enough resource out there. You can teach yourself. I guess what I'm saying is the people who, again, it's like the helplessness, they're just resistant. They want, I don't understand, but they just don't want to be able to do that. And they also don't have the money to spend. So it's kind of like, well, there's only so much you can do.
Where do you see the biggest success with marketing? Is it totally on social media in some form?
I do. Yes. I wish it wasn't, but it is.
I know.
Yeah, I see it there, but I do see people who have kind of niche businesses and they're able to like get into a community. So a lot of it still does happen on social, but I'm thinking of one client right now. They make pet products and they've gotten just really tight with like the dog rescue community. And so all of the organizations know them. They send out emails about this company. So they're able to kind of tap into that alliance and get their name out there in a really clever but also authentic way. And so there's a lot of companies that have that angle if they think hard enough, that kind of alliance angle. And so I also see them have a lot of success because you're tapping into just a really strong pre-existing customer base.
Are you talking primarily of B2C, or are you also seeing that in B2B social?
So
or do you not work that much with B2B, I guess?
Not a ton of B2B. So we do get people making promotional items who are selling B2B, but most people are coming in and want to do B2C.
And where have those promotional items seen the most success?
The people that I've seen the most success are doing kind of direct outreach. So almost like cold pitches, sample mailings, that kind of traction.
Got it. Okay.
Liz, can you talk a bit about pricing, about how to set your price?
Sure. So pricing is kind of, you probably know this given it's a bit of an art form. So we'll come at it from a few angles. If there's some competitors that you just have to be under or at, we'll set up the sourcing accordingly in the design. We'll kind of, retroactively do that. For people who are, most people coming in are like, well, I don't know how to price it and I'm somewhat flexible with how I price it and I need to know how much it's going to cost to make it first. That's like the most common way to come in. Yeah. So in that case, we'll look at the competitive landscape and kind of know where we need to be. But most often, they will price it almost from a futuristic perspective. So they know they need to kind of be at this price point. The manufacturing might not give them the margins they need to be right away to be at that. Like, so let's say they know they want to sell something for $50, right? Because they're smaller or because they don't want to make, 1 million units to start, they might have pricing that's like $30, $35. So that's not going to sustain them for the life of their business. But we'll still price at that and have them gain traction so that the second they're selling, like 6 months down the road, year one, that they're going and improving their margins and producing in higher quantities. So that's typically, it will kind of work backwards in that regard. I will help them do pricing research so that they know they can get down to that number in the future. They're not just making a guess. Does that make sense? So
yeah, I asked because I've heard a couple of different people recommend different things. I work with one guy, and he's telling people, like, don't even bother coming up with a product unless you can have a 70% margin right out of the gate. He's like 70 because you want to get into retail. So I'm just wondering, like, how firm are you with people on this? And it shuts down a lot of people if they think they can't get 70% margin immediately, right?
If you start selling, we'll figure out the pricing. We'll raise the price a bit. We'll find a way to lower cost. I'm just working with someone where we're like tweaking her design. Customers are not even going to notice the difference, but she's saving quite a bit of money. Yeah. I tend to want to solve that problem because I think selling is a much harder problem. Much more complicated problem. And so again, I just come from the belief, if you can sell, we'll find somewhere in the world and we'll figure out how to make it. The wholesale thing though is important. So if your whole business is going to depend on selling to retail, like physical retail stores. So for anyone who doesn't understand, you sell to physical retail stores and then to direct consumers. The retail stores want to buy they don't want to pay any more than 50%, if not less, for your product, right? So if that's your sole business model, then I would agree with the other person. We have to kind of go in, or else there's no point in starting because you're just not going to be able to survive.
Okay.
Most people who start out are not using, maybe about 20% of people we work with are using retail as like their primary strategy, which is interesting. Most people, it's like they'll do a little bit of it, and if stores contact them, they'll sell. But a lot of people are definitely starting out just online.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's always an assumption that you can go to retail later, right? That like, oh, I'll start online. And then, once my product is popular, I'll get it into Bed and Bath, and I'll get it into Walmart, and I'll get it into all these places. But then the cost, like you said, that they wanted the margins that they want.
That is someone's
matter a lot, right?
Yeah, if that is someone's dream goal, they need to really, the research is required up front. You might not have the margins you want in the beginning because of whatever limitations, but you need to be educated enough about what is going to be possible for your design. So we'll even do like full-on sourcing with factories at large quantities to, pricing, quoting, to understand where they can get to once they are producing at that quantity, and then they can kind of price accordingly.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Great.
This has been so informative. I love how we were able to really get specific on everyone's situations. If anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to jump in and unmute yourselves for the final few minutes of this office hours. But Liz, I just wanted to check in if you had any last minute thoughts you wanted to leave everyone with, or where everyone can find you so they can connect with you after this call.
Yeah, so because you all have such unique, I think everyone's coming at this from a very unique place, you are welcome to email me. It's liz@learntomakeaproduct. I'm happy to kind of make any introductions, anything I mentioned. You might have something that kind of comes up. So just feel free to do that. And our website is learntomakeaproduct.com, Instagram, learntomakeaproduct. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Liz. This is really helpful.
Yeah, thanks for joining, guys.
I just dropped
Thank you so much.
Liz's website in the chat. Thank you so much, Liz, for taking the time to really dive deep on this topic, and for all you do to give back to the collective. And thank you everyone for showing up so authentically and just participating today. We really appreciate it. And I hope everyone has an amazing rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you at a future event very soon.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, thanks.